Well, good evening, everybody. My name is Laura Knapp. I am one of the parent consultants at Connecticut Parent Advocacy Center. And welcome to Transition Tuesdays. We are in for a treat today as we have Tim Doyle from Learn with us. And I just want to remind everybody that this event is being recorded. We will broadcast this on our YouTube channel. So just keep in mind the questions that you're asking. And if you don't want any sensitive information, just don't share that with us at this time. Okay. So welcome, Tim. Tim Doyle is the transition specialist at Learn for the Student Support Service Division and has a master's degree in secondary education and transition from the University of Kansas. He's a member of the Connecticut Transition Task Force, Connecticut Task Force Steering Committee, Connecticut Transition Community of Practice Core Team, the National Community of Practice for Student with Complex Needs, and a RESC Alliance Transition Representative. He was a special education teacher with Learn for 7 years in the high school intensive program and at the 18 to 21 Transition Academy. He has a diverse work history, which includes teaching English in the Czech Republic and South Korea, and as a project manager for CW Resources Vocational Rehabilitation Agency. Did I forget anything else, Tim?
No, I think that's everything.
Okay, pretty impressive.
Thanks. Sounds a lot better when someone else says it. Hello, everybody. I'm just going to share my screen. All right. Okay. All right. Okay. Thank you everyone for having me tonight. It's nice being out and doing this in the evening. I have 3 kids at home. This is the latest I've stayed up in a long time. So just to start, this is what the schedule is going to look like. We have an hour, and we kind of have a lot to cover. So I'll try to get through the most important stuff. Introduce some of our PSOGS formulas and our goals and objectives and our activities and all sorts of stuff. I will try to cover it all in this hour, and then leave it open for questions. If you have any questions, there's a little raise your hand button you can press in the Zoom. You can just put it in the chat. Feel free to put anything in the chat at any time. I'm sure Laura and Jen are looking at it, and we'll make sure we get to it. And just kind of keep yourself muted. That way we don't have any distractions. Okay, so just a couple things that are coming up. The Connecticut State Department of Ed also does a transition Tuesday, and I believe it's starting this fall, and it runs through the entire year. It's a really cool event, and it is running on different Tuesdays than the CPAC one, so there is no competition. We also with Learn have a DDS Parents Night. So if you are in the region, you can attend that. There is Charting the Life course training coming up. Again, I don't have specific dates on all of these things, but the information will come out for you. And then the Transition Symposium, which is really cool. It's in January and I believe the first week of February. It's a 3-day event, correct me if I'm wrong. And it has speakers on all different topics. And it's something that if you're interested in transition, or you work in the field, or you have a family member or a child, I would suggest to attend. Okay, so yes. This might be one of my favorite slides. So I keep an ongoing running list of acronyms. It originally started in alphabetical order, but since when these things come up, I always I add more. So this is kind of my running list for you to check out, and then I'm sure you're gonna get a copy of this. You can use it when you go to a PPT, or just when you're talking with people in the field. They tend to use a lot of acronyms. There's one that's disappearing. The ones in blue actually are for tonight. So those are ones I'll be referring to at some point during this presentation. And the one in red there, it just says page and then a little underscore. That's going to disappear because when I first started in special ed, you would go to a meeting and then someone would say, hey, make sure you check page 6 for and update the PSOGs and make sure they align with the PLEP. Can you just, make sure you check on page 11 there? And I was new to this, my head was spinning. I'm like going through papers. Where's page 7? Where's page 11? That sort of thing. But that is disappearing with a new IEP. We're not going to be referring to pages like in the old days, which is a good thing. So we will be talking about Charting the Life course briefly, PREETs and PCP, which is the person-centered planning. Those are all things we'll get to. But I still use this list occasionally too in my own practice. Okay, some updates, housekeeping, nuts and bolts, whichever. There are a couple new things, newish things. Now a student has the right to an education until through the age of 21 until their 22nd birthday. So the day before they turn 22, they can stay in school unless they take their diploma. Connecticut is now a 14 state, which means transition planning starts at the age of 14. Previously was at 16. So it started a little earlier, and it could start even earlier than that if determined by the PPT. A couple other things that I always feel like we should be talking about. The student needs to be invited to the PPT. And in my opinion, the student should participate in their own PPT. There are a lot of different ways to do that. And I don't know if it's too early for a little discussion or a little question from me in this presentation, but how does a student participate in their PPT? Does anyone have any thoughts? Anyone have any experience there? Because a lot of times they don't, which is a bummer. Ooh, someone unmuted, yes.
Yeah, they had my daughter write during class, they had my daughter write a letter to talk about what she was interested in and everything. And then she came to the PPT and she read the letter.
That's great.
So.
That's fantastic. Any way that they can participate in their own PPT is a great thing. That's a good idea. Anybody else have any experiences?
I actually had one student who developed a PowerPoint, and the special education teacher helped the student develop the PowerPoint and ran the whole PPT meeting. It was quite impactful, and it was a great learning experience for this individual.
That's great. We need more of those. We need more of those stories. I had a student who he was able to participate, as much as he could. He propelled his wheelchair into the meeting and was able to hand off all the reports before I left. And he was able to participate in the PPT to the best of his ability, and that's what it's all about. It's about advocacy and self-determination. And I always like to lead with that because it's cool once they get to be the center of their meeting. And so for the PSOGs, which was formerly known as the post-school outcome goal statements, now the post-secondary outcome goal statement, post-secondary ed and training and employment are required. Independent living will be done if determined by the PPT. And also the school districts will provide the transition bill of rights starting in grade 6. That's something that I hope everybody, if you're a parent or a guardian, has received. Okay, I'm just including this for everyone to reference. This is key legislation. The idea, the one that the schools live by, the Individuals with Disabilities Education Act. And then we have the Rehab Act. We have the Perkins 5, and then the Higher Education Opportunity Act. These are things just to put on your radar. Check them out when you have a chance. But I just always want to include this, as part of when you look back and you have this PowerPoint to just as a reminder of the laws that are that you should know. Okay, what is transition planning? It's ongoing process. And the question is always asked, why is it ongoing? And the answer is always the same, because things change. Things change, careers change, priorities change, interests change, everything changes. Life throws you a lot. Life throws everyone a lot. And as part of transition planning, you have to continue to prepare for all those changes. Because I can even say for myself, I can't even begin to tell you how many times I've said, I'm gonna be this, or I start to go to school for that, or I change my job to this, or I have to tell my parents that I'm no longer gonna do that. Things do change, and that's what makes this an ongoing process. Now, the other question we get a lot is, when does it start? Again, there's not a good answer for that. It can start very, very early, depending on the student and depending on the student's needs and depending on how much of a planner you are or the family is. But my recommendation is to always start early, especially with career and post-secondary awareness, available services, and of course, financial planning. All that stuff should be done very early. Okay, on to the next one. This is PCP. Can anyone remember what that was without looking? Person-centered planning. I'll answer it. So regardless of the track, whether it's employment, support employment, group supported employment, DSO, post-secondary education, the philosophy should remain the same. The student should say at the center of the planning, and there should be meaningful involvement of the student, the family, and the friends, and everyone involved in their life. Because it is each person's fundamental right to maximum self-determination and community inclusion. And that's at the heart of person-centered planning. So I've included a list of all the different mechanisms to do that. Charting the life course is one I'm most familiar with, that I'm a trainer for, and that I use for a lot of my families, and I really believe in it. I've also been part of a MAPS meeting, which is, it's a fantastic process. It's very emotional, and all these person-centered planning tools are, because not only are you planning a trajectory for a good life, you're also discussing the things you don't want. And so is the student involved, and the family and the friends. So check all of these out. You can Google them, look them up. They have, most of them are free, I believe. I'd have to get back to you on that. But each one has its own positives, depending on what the student or what your family member requires. But again, person-centered planning, I couldn't advocate for this more. It's truly seeing the total person. Okay, and so here's just, I always like to add in some resources, because who can't use more resources? Who can't use more open tabs on their internet browser? So here is a checklist from the State Department, which I would look into, and just another transition checklist. It can't hurt to have a plan, and it can't hurt to see how others are doing it. So again, I'm just going to keep putting these out there. Hopefully you get some time to check them out. All right, so here are some important dates, and this is more on the DDS track. I always like to include these two. A DDS, that's the Department of Developmental Services, can be done at any age, but you want to do it before the age of 18, and the testing needs to be done before the age of 18. The BRS, level up services between the ages of 16 and 22. Guardianship or conservatorship, there are a lot of different types of conservatorship. I won't get into all those because honestly, I don't know them all. I would have to look them up. But this is something that when you're going through this process, your teacher, your transition coordinator, your state services provider, anybody there can help you with this information and what type of, if guardianship is an option or if which conservatorship is an option for you as well. The SSI is age 18. Husky C is 18 to 22. And I included the DDS helpline there too for additional information. Okay, this is something that you can find on the State Department of Ed transition website, which I don't have a link for in this presentation, I don't believe, but it's worth a look. So this is the transition flow chart. And there's two things I love, and it's formulas and flow charts. And this puts together transition planning perfectly. It kind of shows a progression. And this is how I've structured this presentation too, by this progression. So we're going to start with transition assessment and career exploration, which you use those things to find needs and strengths and preferences and interests. And then again, this is things I'm going to go into in just a second, but all of those things are used to do your measurable PSOGs, your annual goals, your objectives, and then that's when you start to do some more exploration. Okay. And this, again, I am throwing in a very cool resource. This is the Transition Resources booklet. It has a section for career exploration that I use. It has all different types of assessments and like little curriculum. It's cool. It can help. It can kind of help create individualized programming for a student. It can help assess. It can help with a teacher or a parent or administrator get a better idea on which direction to go for a student during transition planning. But with career exploration, just simply put, it's just learning about various occupations. And it's about your awareness. It does come first along with assessment. And that's a lot of times to determine your educational trajectory. You want to align it with your skills and interests. And then you have to figure out, am I qualified to do this? And if I am, how do I get there? What steps? Do I require post-secondary education? Do I require vocational training? So that's something that comes at the beginning along with age-appropriate assessment.
Really
This is-
quickly, Tim, I just
Sorry.
want to let folks know that we are posting some of the links in the chat. So if anybody missed it, just email, just reach at us and we can repost the links to some of the resources that Tim spoke about.
Okay, thank you. And age-appropriate assessment, it's an ongoing process also, because like we discussed before, the results will change. Everything could potentially change. So you want to constantly be assessing what it is you're interested in, where your needs are, where your strengths are, and your preferences. And I always kind of, when it comes to preferences versus interests, they sound so similar. I always had a hard time figuring out one versus the other. And then, so analogy I like to use my own. So I have an interest in exercising. I like to exercise, but I don't like to lift heavy things, and I don't like to be around other people. So my preference is running in the woods somewhere where nobody can see me. So you have your interest, and then within that interest is your preference. And that's kind of the best analogy I can come up with. If you have one, put it in the chat, and I would love to hear it. And so we use a lot of this age-appropriate assessment, and that is done for your post-secondary goals. This data isn't just used to check a box. You're using this to create goals, objectives, and student-specific programming. Okay. Does anybody have any questions? And are we going too fast? No and no. Okay. So again, putting more links in here for you. The Transition Tennessee website is I'm trying to think of a good analogy. It is the best. I don't even know what it is. It is the LeBron James of transition information. It has everything you need. It has podcasts, it has webinars, it has assessments, it has curriculum, it has all the information that you can need for the transition process. Because it's a scary, hard time, and this website will give you the best information, at least in my opinion. And then also Arkansas this is just specifically for assessments. They have it broken down by domain, whether it's vocational, independent living, post-secondary ed. They have it for students with more complex needs, and it's all broken down there, and you can go and you can get it. They're free, and then you can use those assessments at school, or you can use them as a guide. But again, this is something that is really helpful, and I still use it every day. Usually I would give everyone 5 to 10 minutes to check them out while thinking of a student or a child, but we're a little pressed on time, so that's something you can do for homework. Okay, on to the post-secondary outcome goal statements, the PSOGs. It's actually now post-secondary is one word, so it's POGs. Don't get that confused with the 90s milk cap game. It is the post-secondary outcome goal statement. And so this is what they should be right here. They should be appropriate, measurable, based on transition assessments. They have to be aligned to an objective, or objective must be aligned to them. So if you have an independent living post-school outcome goal statement, you have to have a goal that goes along with it. It could also be written in the first person. So it's funny, someone once told me that, like, oh no, not everything can be a formula. I disagree. So with that in mind, here is the PSOGs or POGs formula. And if you are a parent and you get an IEP coming home, this is your quality control device right here. If you are an educator, use it. So I'm going to go over each one. So first, we're going to start with the when. So you will receive a failing grade for a PSOGs or POG if the when does not happen after graduation. So you can do it any way you want. After I graduate, cool. Upon graduation, awesome. Upon completion of high school, cool. That's a pass. If you see during high school, while at the Transition Academy, before I graduate, by this time next year, fail, 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 fail. It needs to happen afterwards because you are setting a post-secondary goal. This goal is for after the student graduates. And it is when the student reaches the transition age, these post-secondary outcome goal statements are what drives the education. Okay, this is where your objectives come from. This is where your goals come from. This is where your planning comes from. And this is where your individualized programming comes from, is the post-secondary outcome goal statement. Very important. Okay, part 2, the what. And this, again, we're talking about a hopeful vision for the future. So we're using the word will. The tricky thing about the English language is it doesn't have a future tense. So we use will to make the assumption that's happening in the future. So it is a will statement. Becky will successfully complete. Becky will work full-time. Becky will go to college. You want to avoid the language, wants to pursue, has expressed interest. Those are things that are great coming out of an assessment. Those are things that are great in a conversation about transition. Those are not great with your post-school, post-secondary goal statement. You want to use will. And again, that is for it happening in the future. And we're being optimistic, and we're creating goals that are achievable based on their interest. Part 3, this is for what purpose? So if you look over here on the left, I combined 2 and 3. So the third part is at a technical institute to attain a certificate. So Becky will work full-time in the field of her choice. Becky will go to college to earn a degree. So when you want to put those two things together and avoid, some of these you might look at like, oh, that's funny. Hopefully you can do this. Hopefully I've seen this before. So you want to avoid that language. So Becky will go to college because her parents want her to. That is not, sometimes that could be what drives a lot of conversations, what the parents want. And of course, the parents' wants and needs to be taken into consideration as well because they're a part of the team. However, this is a post-secondary outcome goal statement for the student. Here we go, all together. We have the red when, we have the blue what, and we have the purple for what purpose. Does anyone have any questions on this? Or any stories of some terrible PSOGs, or has no one, or maybe not heard of them? No? Okay. Quiet group.
I know it's very quiet. I mean, I can think of some PSOGs that are that weren't great. Something along the lines of, I'll use your name, Tim, just because I'm looking at you. Tim will explore his interest in doing inventory. That was the actual PSOG. Like,
Oh, no,
okay. So there's been some interesting ones out there.
that does not
We
fit
do have
the
a
formula.
question from MS. Do you want to unmute yourself? MS, are you able to unmute yourself to ask a question? Okay, we'll go to Lisa's question then. When are they created and at what point or age?
Okay, PSOGs are created once the student turns 14. Like we said earlier on, the transition plan begins at age 14. Actually, I mean, technically it can be 13 because it's like 13 of the year you're turning 14. So that's when you start the transition planning. But again, if the team decides it can be done, it should be done earlier, then it can.
Thank you. And did you want to try to unmute yourself again to ask your question? MS? Okay, she's going to type it. Okay, or he.
Great.
And as a follow-up question from Lisa, what are other names for PSOG?
That's those are the only two that I know. Post-secondary outcome goal statement, post-school outcome goal statement, PSOGs. That's all I've heard. Doesn't mean there's not more out there.
That's all I've heard.
No.
Here's another question. How do you measure goals that are written for after graduation?
That's a great question. They are measurable or attainable. So you are writing them using that formula rather than, so if you're saying after graduation, the student will, boom, do something that makes it measurable, whether they can do it or whether they cannot do it. I don't know if we're looking at a good way to quantify it. I don't have an answer for that. But making it achievable, attainable usually makes it measurable. And if you guys have a better answer for that than I do, please.
Well, I'm
Sorry.
thinking, and I'm wondering if this is the real question. So you have the post-secondary or post-school, depending on what IEP you have, outcome goal statement, and that generates the transition, the annual transition goals. So it should be in there if they're going through college. There should be, resume writing or applying for colleges, looking at colleges. So I'm not sure if that was kind of the question to go along with that.
Because yeah,
I'm
those,
sure okay.
yeah, like, and that's what we're getting to right now, Beth.
I was gonna say, I'm sure you'll get
So that like Laura said, so you have your assessment, you have your post-secondary or post-school outcome goal statements, and then that drives the programming. So that's where you create your annual goals, you create your objectives that align with those goals. And like Laura was saying too, those are connected directly to your post-school outcome goal statements. And this is another chart here. It's not as, I mean, it's a little bit more confusing, but again, it's another resource to check out with that same information where you are using that assessment information to create a career path. Now, the new objectives are a little bit different in the new IEP. So you still have the same, some people use the SMART goals, some, everyone kind of uses a different formula again to create their objectives, but it does kind of include like the skill, like the target level, setting, prompting level. But the new one in the new IEP is baseline. You have to include baseline data in your, or baseline in your objective. So you can say, with a baseline of A, the student will increase the skill by this percentage above baseline. So that's a new part of an IEP, the new IEP.
we have a bunch of questions coming in, so I don't know if you want to get to them now, if you want to hold up.
Let's do them.
Okay.
We don't have too much more to go.
Okay.
I'll answer them to the best of my ability, and if I don't have the answer, I can find it for you, because I certainly do not know everything, and I just try my best.
Yes, you do. Yes, you do. So Lisa asks, are they required to be done? My sons haven't been done, and he's over 14. I'm assuming you're talking about the PSOCs, correct, Lisa?
Yes, they should be done.
They are required.
Mhm. Yes, they should be written, and again, they should be written for employment, post-secondary ed, and if the team decides, independent living. But again, the independent living is optional.
And I have a question from MS.
Okay.
Is this
Oh,
a
that's the great question last time.
Yeah.
Can't wait.
Is this a PSOC? Will be able to engage in an independent study that will help them determine post-secondary options? Is that acceptable? And when does the general student population work on transition?
Okay, so let me do the second one first, the general, and I can, let's see if I can get a slide. So this I like to include too. This is a good way to show that transition can be done from the elementary level, starting with exploration and awareness, with field trips and different things like that. So the transition can start at any time. The earlier, the better. It can start as early as at the elementary school with career exploration and field trips. And like you can even do cool little job shadowing and volunteering activities too, just to have that awareness. And the post-secondary track is the same as this up here, that formula, the awareness, exploration, preparation. That is the same idea when you're talking about a post-secondary track as you are a vocational track like this. So the question before about, is that a PSOCs? I probably have to see it written, as long as it.
Do you want me to repeat it?
Yeah. Can you? Let's see if we can.
Sure.
Let's see if we can do this.
will be able to engage in an independent study that will help them determine post-secondary options.
Okay, so, okay, first, there is no when. So it should be after graduation. Exploring post-secondary options, that's something that could potentially be an objective or a goal that you can work on in order to achieve a post-secondary outcome goal statement. So the when should be upon graduation. The what should be the student will, sorry, the student will attend a post-secondary institute of their choice, something like that. I'm sorry, I have a hard time figuring out if I'm not looking at it, but
Right,
I would
right.
say
So it
the way-
sounds more like an annual goal versus a PSOC, like an annual transition goal, in my humble opinion.
and that's what I would agree to, or even an
Yeah.
objective
Right,
in
right,
the post-secondary goal area.
Right,
Because you
right.
got to be a little more specific. So if you decide upon graduation, the student will successfully complete a post-secondary education opportunity of their choice. I mean, that's very, very general, but that's probably the better option. But again, use the formula, plug it right in.
And I think Denise has a question. She's had her hands up for quite some time. So Denise, if you want to unmute and ask your question.
Hi, Denise.
Hi, thank you. So I what if one of the challenges that I've noticed is finding those goals in the IEP. Like I see where they're supposed to be and they've not existed. And if they are, let me just say that they don't exist. How do you tell the school system that they need to write these? I mean,
Okay, that, and that's, I do have an answer for you. However, we do have a couple advocates on the call.
mhm.
Jen and Laura, if you have a, this is kind of,
I just typed in my email address and
Okay.
email me and we'll have a conversation.
yeah.
Okay, that'd be great. Thank you.
Because those things are required to be in an
Yes.
IEP if a student is over the age of 14.
Okay. Thank you.
You're welcome. Thanks for the question.
We have a couple more questions and oops,
Yeah,
I
keep 'em
actually
coming.
only sent, actually sent my email to Jen, not to everybody. Thank you, Jen, for reposting. Okay. Why is independent living optional? I thought the transition guidelines statements reads and not or.
For independent living,
Yes.
it's just it's the way the law is stated. Independent living is optional. But if a student requires it, then in that case, it's not. If the student requires education in independent living, then it's something that is the responsibility of the team, including the student, to put into the IEP and make part of their program.
The other question is, would we continue these goals and objectives in the 18 to 21 programs?
Yes. Yep. But again, you have to continue even during the 18 to 21 programs. You have to continue assessing, and every year when you meet as a team, you have to decide if the PSOGs are still relevant. And that is, again, based on assessment data and student interest. It's not just a group of people saying, yeah, this is fine, check the box, move on to the next one. No, this is like, you need to go over your assessment data, your preference assessments, and sometimes, sometimes preference assessments aren't totally effective, and that happens. And if that is the case, and you have a harder time finding out interest, that's when you have to come together as a team to find out a more creative option to identifying interests and preferences.
Jamie has a question. My son's annual is coming up February, and I do not believe any have been planned. He will be 18 in March. They are starting transition planning then per his IEP. They should have already started it, and you can email me and we can set up a conversation if you like.
Yeah, if the student is 18 years old, and there's not any transition objectives or goals in their IEP and there's no PSOGs, I would say that's something that should have been done. It most certainly should have been done. And I think Laura was going to give you her email.
Yes, and I think that it might be in there. You just may not know where to find them, and we can go over that as well.
And it's different than new IEP. And, you know, it's a confusing time because some districts are still using IEP Direct right at this moment and transitioning into the new IEP in the CT SED system. That's the new IEP Direct with the new looking IEP. There is, and I have it here. I was looking at it before. There is an old IEP versus a new IEP side-by-side document that might be really helpful.
Yes,
I have
it's on
right here.
the State Department's website, and we can
Yeah.
pop that into the chat.
I can put it right in the chat right now.
I have a question.
Shoot. Is this, who's talking, please?
It's Jamie.
Hi, Jamie.
Hi. So I do think I just found it in his IEP.
Okay.
But it says that he will pursue and complete post-secondary education, and after graduation, he will gain employment in the field of his interest. But I don't remember ever discussing these. So I have a little issue with him as I'm going for conservatorship for him, that they're asking him all of these questions and they're just planning everything off of what he says.
Okay.
Now, to go around that.
I don't necessarily know because how old is he? I'm sorry.
He'll be 18 in March.
Okay, so he's still okay. Well, I mean, it's definitely good that he should be a part of the process and he should share his interests. But you are also a member of the team and the current guardian. So I'd imagine that you should be part of that process. And again, you should certainly be aware that a post-school outcomes goal statement was created, but this is again a Laura Jen, I would say, question. Am I right, Laura?
I've actually never heard of those letters or anything until tonight.
Oh,
Yeah.
cool.
And I
Well, at
think-
least you learned it tonight. I'm very happy.
For learning something, this is good. I think we need to go over like, what is the difference between post-school outcome goal statements? I know I said it the old way, and annual transition goals and objectives, because I know that can get really confusing for parents, and they are different.
They are. Okay, so you have your post-school or post-secondary outcome goal statements that are done annually, and you are always updating that information. And based off that information, you have goals and objectives in that category, like a goal for your IEP year, and then objectives that go along with that goal for the IEP year. So those are things that you're working on during that year. And then when you go back during your annual meeting, you create new IEP goals and objectives in all those categories. And you also update your post-school outcome goal statements in those categories. Does that make sense, or should I pull out a visual?
I think if you have a visual, that would be great. I always kind of, in my mind, I say it on the PSOGs or the post-school outcome goal statements. That's like the statement of what will happen after high school, and all the transition goals and objectives are how that student is going to get to that point after high school. What
That's
skills
correct.
will they be developing?
And I brought up this one again. So right here, it says, write measurable post-school outcome goal statements. They're PSOGs there. This was the older one. It's now, you'll now see it as post-secondary. And then underneath them, you have your 3 categories in purple. And then from there, you have your annual IEP goals and objectives. And it would be the same. So imagine the red part here, annual IEP goals and objectives. You have them for reading, you have them for speech, you have them for math, you have them for those things. But in this case, you have them for transition. And they're based on your purple here, post-school outcome goal statement. That makes sense. I see Denise has her hand up.
I think that's from before.
Oh,
Denise,
okay.
do you have a new question, or is your hand just still up from before?
I can lower your hand for you.
Thanks. We have just 2 more questions.
Sure. I'm
Who'd-
actually all finished with the presentation, because all I was going to do is, go over the work-based learning continuum, which you guys can
Okay.
check
you
out.
did.
And then I have the just this list of curriculum. It's start to finish curriculum of self-determination. It's from the Zaro Center. It's fantastic. It gives you units and lessons and activities. The soft skill one from DOL. And you have, these are all the different ones that you can use, that teachers can use. You can look up yourself to kind of check out what skills are required. I would also, CPAC has a very cool curriculum too. Am I right, Laura?
Yes. Yep.
Yeah, that would
And
be
I
one to-
believe Jen posted our transition page already.
Perfect.
And we
Okay,
do
so let me
transition
go to this
Tuesday?
last slide. What questions do you have for me?
All right. I'm actually, while we're getting to questions, I'm going to quickly do a poll before I forget. It's just 3 short little questions. If you can answer it, that would be great while we're asking questions. Okay. One question was, who does the continuing evaluations, the school system, question mark,
Who does the continuing transition
assessments?
assessment? Somebody on the team. Here at Learn, the teachers will do it along with the transition specialist, myself. There are some that we send home to parents that they complete too. There are some that we do directly with the parents, like charting life course for one. So we have, yep, those are all the different ways to do it, the different people. Anyone on the team could really do it.
I know sometimes though, like other Learn or Correct or somebody else will do assessments, and sometimes the school will hire someone to do an assessment. So it's a team discussion.
Yep, that's correct. I could also, Learn also does that as well. We
Yep.
could do some transition assessments for the school district.
Okay, and the next question was, can parents do the assessments at home themselves if the school doesn't do them?
The school should be doing them. And if they send some home to you, that's great. Parents' input is extremely valuable in planning for the student's next IEP and during the transition planning process.
Are there any other questions? I'm not sure if Juanita has any questions. Oh, yes.
Okay.
Who determines when the student has completed transition planning? And what if the goals have had to be adjusted so they are easier for the student to achieve them, but the student still needs to achieve the original, more challenging goal?
Okay, so the transition planning is ongoing. It should continue until the student ages out or graduates. So it's a continuous process. I don't think it's ever really completed for anybody, really. And what if the goals have had to be adjusted? Okay, so they can achieve them. Again, because you're using this assessment data, because they should always be updated. They should always be changed to reflect, changing interests or, changes in the life. That's okay. You can change them. That's why we reevaluate. But the student still needs to achieve the original, more challenging goal. So when we're talking about like going backwards to an original, more challenging goal, maybe that goal can be, again, this is probably more for like an IEP goal and objectives, the corresponding objectives. My guess would be to break down that skill into smaller parts and write objectives for those, and then scaffold or benchmark and try to build up those mastered skills in order to achieve a more challenging goal. I think that's usually the way it's addressed in school. But again, that's something that you can bring up with the team. If you have an objective or a new objective, what is the plan to address it?
Okay. Is transition and goals only, oh, we got a whole bunch of questions all of a sudden. Is transition and goals only addressed in an annual?
No, it should be, again, ongoing. It should be addressed constantly. Should be brought up at a triennial, sure. There's transition assessments that can be done during a triennial evaluation. Are there lists of college transition and vocational programs in Connecticut online? Yes. There are, Kristen, there are lists of college transition and vocational programs. I know of a few. Now, is there a list? I don't have a list. Laura, do you have a list?
I have a small list and an older manual, and I can, was that Kristen? I can get that out, Kristen.
Okay. And there are some other small businesses in the area that focus primarily on helping students, achieve their post-secondary goals and help them with the transition to college. So those are out there too.
Yes, Lisa, you can get the list as well. We can just send the list to everybody in the group. That would be easier.
Yeah, great. All right, Jen, just put that in the chat.
Thank you.
Thanks, Jen. Elizabeth has a question.
My son does receive, he's 19 right now, and has actually a really good looking plan. And we've discussed transitions for a while now. My question is there, I'm actually thinking after this is all said and done, in regards to within the school responsibility, once he ages out, that's the part I'm mostly worried about. So at what point during these transition meetings is it appropriate to begin thinking about that post 22 year age? Because he's going to go from a child who's receiving significant services, round the clock services, to that's what I'm worried about. So at what point is it appropriate for me to be now as he's 19, or is it closer to the age, or what do you suggest?
I suggest looking into all that as soon as possible. And then the school district, your team should invite the agency to the PPTs, and that'll make the process, the transition go a lot quicker. The information will be able to be shared as long as you sign, sign a waiver so you can share that information. I would get that going as soon as possible.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Can you recommend a few assessments to determine level of need for independent living? Yes. So in this PowerPoint, Laura, is everyone going to get a copy of it?
Yes, I've been posting it throughout the presentation. I just reposted it.
Okay, great. So what you can do, MS, is if you look on, I think it's Arkansas and the Transition Tennessee, you can go in there. You do have to sign up. It's free, the Transition Tennessee one. And then you can, they have a search engine within the website and you can look up independent living and it'll just pull up all of the independent living assessments that they have available. And the one in Arkansas has an independent living section where you can pull out assessments as you need them. And those should be free. Yes. Yes, they are. The question was, are they recognized by Connecticut schools? The answer is yes. Okay, we have a question from Jamie. Reading my son's PSOGs, they are great goals, but they are unrealistic as it appears him and the school are ready to send him off to college. How do you get them to understand that he can't live on his own, never mind go off to college? This is certainly a discussion that you should have with the team. And my recommendation, and again, I will pass this to Laura, would be to if this is how you feel, to have this conversation sooner rather than later.
Yep, I would totally agree. Having those courageous conversations about what is achievable, what is not, but also speaking as a parent myself, I thought my child could not do certain things and the school district was telling me they could do certain things. And I had to take a step back because looking at it through a different lens, but having those conversations and setting up opportunities for your students or for your child, your young adult, to practice those skills to see what they can and can't do.
And this is a perfect opportunity for more, like Laura was saying, not just to have those conversations, but maybe some more formal transition planning and some transition assessments to really see what you guys want this objective or this goal to be.
Right. And even doing some, I'm thinking of the person-centered planning, working with, charting life courses, something along those lines can help determine some of those things and skills that need building, or some of the, getting that information could be helpful.
Comment about age-appropriate transition assessments. Yes, we spent a lot of time on that tonight.
Ongoing transition assessments.
Yes.
Yes.
And again, I didn't, I'll put my information into the chat here. If you have any transition related questions, feel free to email me because I am the contact for this region. And if it's a question I cannot answer, I will make sure that I get to the people that do, or that can't answer those questions. Let's see. Is there a list of sample PSOGs? Yes, there are sample PSOGs. I believe this Connecticut State Department of Ed website, the transition one. I think we put that in the chat.
I just reposted it.
Okay, you'll get some there, and I believe Building a Bridge also has some in there too. Can you speak a little more about what you do at your job at Learn? Oh, at Learn. Okay. So the question was just speak a little more about what I do at Learn. I'm a transition specialist, so I do a lot of professional development and state level committee work, but with the organization, I do a lot of transition planning with parents and with students. I consult with teachers about creating community-based learning, functional academics, vocational training, post-secondary ed, preparation. things like that. I also spend a lot of time working one-on-one with students. Because you cannot, no matter what your job is, you cannot lose that connection because it happens really quickly. You spend a year, spend 2 in an office, meetings with committees, and you lose that connection to students can really be detrimental. So I make sure to spend a lot of time directly with students. So as a whole, that's what I do, but I'm also, if you do have any questions or any concerns, I am the, again, the RESC representative for transition. And I can't guarantee that I know the answers to everything, but I know the people that do know all the answers.
Any other questions? We just posted a whole bunch of information in the chat, so I want to give everybody a little bit of time to either download or go to the State Department of Education's secondary transition planning page.
How do we access? So you can copy and paste them into your browser. I always create a, old, I don't even know if I would call it old school, but like I have a Word document with categories and links. I don't know if that's how people do it anymore, but that's always been what's most comfortable for me.
That's what works for me. So that I remember what the links go to.
Yeah, it's just, again, ongoing documents. I love ongoing documents. You just feel like you're building something.
Jen was reading my mind. We can put together a Word document and send it out to the group with all the links on it.
I apologize for overloading the links, but there's so much information out there. It's not, these days, it's not what you know, it's how to get access to the stuff. And again, I'll just say lastly, thanks for having me. This was great. And if you have any transition related questions, please reach out. My email's there. And don't hesitate.
Absolutely. Thank you so much for joining us.
Yeah, this is great.
Okay. So next month on November 8th, we will be discussing the transition section of the new IEP and CT sets. Same time, 7 to 8:30, and we will actually have myself and Beth Reel, who was our former transition coordinator, who is a wealth of information, who is now one of our executive officers. Thank you everybody for joining us. We just got a comment. Would love a part 2.
Wow, can't wait to go home and tell my family someone actually likes to listen to me talk.
Yes, I would agree. Part 2 would be great. Pat, it is November 8th, the second Tuesday of the month. I just got a quick question about the Zoom link when the meeting's over. It'll be on YouTube in about a week or so. And usually there's a link that goes out saying it's on YouTube.